what stood out to me. We're used to people being charged, not organizations, right? I don't remember Enron, the corporation, being charged, but I certainly remember its CEO, CFO, and others. How does this work that it's an organization, and how big a deal is this? Seems weird.
Sure. Well, you're absolutely. Yeah, well, it's not that unusual, Stephanie. It's a little bit odd. Our preference is always to charge individuals, to ascribe criminal liability to people and not to organizations. But sometimes we do charge organizations. If a corporation or a company, an organization is rife with fraud, or you need to change the corporate culture, or they have a checkered past of abiding the law. You mentioned Enron, and you're quite right. It was the president and the CEO who were charged, individuals. But if you recall, during the Enron scandal, the giant accounting firm, Arthur Andersen, was charged. We used to have a big five accounting firms. Now we have four because Arthur Andersen went out of business as a result of being charged. That said, and I know Joyce will agree with this, we always prefer to charge individuals when we can. Sometimes we can't. And sometimes if a company or organization really does have a checkered history of abiding with the law, it is appropriate to charge the company. It doesn't mean that we won't also charge individuals down the road.
All right, Joyce. Well, these potential individuals aren't just some nameless, faceless suits. We're talking about Trump himself. He's the founder. His sons, they're the executive vice presidents. And, of course, Ivanka Trump. What happens to all of them here?
As Chuck points out, the fact that the corporation gets indicted or reportedly will be indicted doesn't rule out additional indictments down the road for individuals. And there is always this strong preference for trying to hold people personally accountable for criminal misconduct. The corporation can be fined, like Arthur Andersen. It can even go out of business, but it can't go into custody. Corporations don't go to prison. And so one would expect that 2 years into this investigation, there will be a strong push, if the evidence is there, to go ahead and indict individuals to make sure that the people who are responsible for misconduct, allegedly here for fraud, do end up being held accountable. That sends a strong message to the remainder of the business community in New York that this kind of conduct won't be tolerated and that they are personally at risk, no matter who they are, if they are involved in this sort of criminal activity.
Chuck, here's the other thing I do not get. That prosecutors are giving Trump's attorneys one more chance to convince them not to file charges. I'm a mere civilian. This seems wacky to me. It's normal?
Oh, well, you're more than a mere civilian, Stephanie. You're a pretty astute observer. But yeah, it's normal. In white-collar cases in particular, there is often a great deal of back and forth between prosecutors and defense attorneys. When I was a federal prosecutor and when I was prosecuting white-collar cases, I would invite defense attorneys in to give me a presentation to tell me why I ought not charge the case or why my theory of prosecution was wrong. Rarely did it dissuade me, but if they had a compelling argument or there was a weakness in my case, I would want to know about it before charging. So this back and forth that you see may strike, lay observers as odd, but it happens all the time. It's not nefarious, and often prosecutors can use it to strengthen their case, believe it or not.
All right, Joyce, lastly, adding to the list of things I don't get, over the weekend, ABC's Jonathan Karl put out an excerpt from his new book, In the Atlantic. In it, former Attorney General Bill Barr, Trump's guy, he talked about Trump's allegations of voter fraud or election fraud, and he said, quote, "It was my suspicion all the way along that there was nothing there. It was all BS." Right? That's huge. That's massive. Except here's the thing. How massive is it? It was not an official statement. He didn't say it at the time. He said it to an author writing a book. It is not going to have any sort of impact on the audits. It's not going to save any taxpayer money around these audits. What difference does it make that Bill Barr is saying this now? The damage has been done. I mean, all those people pushing for these audits, I'm guessing they don't read The Atlantic.
I think you're exactly right here. This should be the final nail in the coffin of Bill Barr's reputation. If he believed this, if he knew this in December, That means he could have spared the country much of the enormous trauma that we went through in January 6th and with the big lie. Bill Barr, as the Attorney General, even as the former Attorney General, could have stood up and explained to the American people that the election was untainted by fraud. The fact that he chose to remain silent and only to let this filter out now months later when a book is released, it is absolutely untenable. This is not the sort of conduct Americans are entitled to from an Attorney General.